A lot of Americans can really struggle with the reverse culture shock if they are moving to Spain. I am an American who has been living in Spain for the past 2 years, and there are definitely things I have noticed that I think really inconvenience a lot of Americans. I notice it even when I travel there with my family. And so I kind of wanted to go through some of these things to show, I don't think they're technically inconveniences, but it's just a different way of how they live their life. And if you want to live there and adapt well to the, community and the culture, these are just things you're probably just going to have to live with unless you're rich and have some super big budget or something that you can afford a lot of these conveniences. But for a lot of people, they're all kind of the same. I'll tell you from my experience, I think the hardest one to adapt to, depending on where you're going at the end. So stay tuned for that one. But I think the biggest inconvenience, depending on which country you are in Europe, of course, is the speed of things. So first will be restaurants. A lot of times when you go out to eat, or even if you're getting pickup food, or even delivery food, which is becoming more common now. So if you really order out a lot of food, that is an option, but it's not quite as big or as common as here. But things are a lot slower, especially Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, those types of places. You sit down, you might wait 5 or 10 minutes to get a menu or someone to come over, another 5 or 10 minutes to order drinks. So it's a very long process. But a part of that is because they don't want to rush meals. Food is seen as, something where you gather together most of the time with other people or with friends, or if you're just by yourself, kind of just taking a break. It's not something they necessarily rush through, so a lot of things won't be fast. Even if you go and get a coffee and a croissant or something, things aren't, busting out in a minute, like at Starbucks in America, for example. So it's really more about taking your time to order and taking time for those meals. There are, to-go places where you can get stuff, but it's still just not going to be as fast, ordering food. They do have Uber Eats and what they use Glovo instead of like a DoorDash, so you can't order stuff, but it's not as fast. Also, most grocery stores don't do grocery delivery. I know Mercadona does, but you have to plan it days to about a week in advance to get a slot, because they don't offer many slots because it's not common for them and they don't have a ton of vans and stuff, and there is an Instacart in Europe. So definitely the grocery thing too. If you did need to order something, it could take a little longer. They do now have Amazon in Spain, and if you do use it, you have to actually go in and switch your actual Amazon, or it will show you the American Amazon and then ridiculous shipping and all those different charges for international stuff. So if you want to use it, you have to switch. It is a lot more limited than the American Amazon, but they do have a lot of the basics and 2-day shipping. Most stuff will take 2 to 3 days. You're probably not going to get it the next day or same day, but it is a 2-day option, which is pretty good if you did need something like that. So that is a good option there as well. So things are just slower paced, which a lot of Americans, especially depending on what city you're from or anything like that, want things fast. They want to check out fast. They want to get their groceries fast. They want to get their takeout fast. They want to eat a meal in less than 30 minutes and be out of the way. And that just doesn't exist in Europe. So definitely something to consider when you're moving there, that it will definitely feel like a lot slower pace of life. The next thing will also be kind of going into conveniences, but going to the grocery store more often. Most European kitchens have a much smaller fridge and freezer, so you won't be able to have as much food in it. I mean, they don't really have bulk. There are some Costco's, I know, in Spain, and a few, but people don't really buy stuff, especially food, in bulk. I think a big reason for that is, one, it's just not a thing, and two, they don't use as many preservatives and chemicals in their food, so it doesn't stay as good for as long. Most fruits and vegetables only last a couple days, even in the fridge. Most breads and even chips and things like that, will dry out within a day or so. So you have to use things pretty fast, so people don't buy a ton of stuff at once, because it will go bad pretty soon. And so you also then don't need such a huge fridge and freezer, because, well, freezer is kind of different. But you don't need a bigger fridge because stuff is just going to go bad quite a bit faster. Also, most places don't have ice machines. That is definitely one thing that's been nice here. Being in Arizona, we've been going through a bad heat wave. I think a lot of the country and Europe has, but having a built-in ice maker is really common, especially now a lot of fridges and freezers will have built-in water machines or ice freezers to have colder water, and or built-in ice machines. That's really not a thing in Europe. Most of the time, if you go and get something cold, it doesn't always come with ice. You have to ask and sometimes even pay more. So a lot of Europeans use just old-fashioned ice racks where you fill it up with water or an ice tray and then put it in your freezer. So that is something you will have to keep doing if you like drinking ice in a lot of your beverages at home. That is something also to consider when moving abroad. But also too, it seems like an inconvenience having to go every few days or every other day. But especially if you're out walking around, even if it's just walking your dog or going out to meet friends, or if you have kids and going out, like you're probably going to walk by some sort of grocery store. There are the big chains, which normally aren't open on Sunday. Those are the cheapest options, but you're probably going to walk by one. Most neighborhoods have at least 1 to 2 of the big chains in them. So it is pretty easy to walk to, 5 to 20 minutes most, depending on where you live and things like that. There's also kind of the smaller chain stores. A lot of those are open on Sundays. They do cost a little slightly more than like a Lidl or an Aldi or one of those chains. So something to consider, but a lot of those, and even the smaller ones, are even more common. Everywhere, every couple of blocks, you'll probably have one. So it's really easy when you're going to and from work, like I said, or out with the dogs, or just to take a walk or get a coffee. You'll probably pass by one. So it's really easy to just pop in, grab a few things, and then take it home with you. So that is really easy. And a lot of people there are always carrying some type of bag with them normally. So you have something for your groceries. That is one thing that is more expensive in Europe than in America, is the cost of grocery bags. A lot of American cities, you don't have to pay for grocery bags. I know when I lived in Chicago, it was 7 cents per bag. Actually, in Europe, it is 14 cents per bag, so it is double the cost. So it really encourages people to reuse a lot of their plastic bags, or a lot of people carry a cloth bag or some type of bag with them, or especially you see with a lot of the older people, the little kind of suitcase looking carriers. But also something to consider with the ones that kind of look like a suitcase is if you have stairs or not. A lot of European buildings do not have stairs. So if you are on the 6th floor, they start with 0 as ground floor instead of 1. So 5th floor there would be 6th floor American. So you have to consider that having that big bulky thing isn't the easiest to carry up. I lived on the 5th floors, American 4th there, so 5 flights of stairs. So I didn't have one of those roller things. Thankfully, I didn't live too far, so I could easily carry most stuff about less than 10 minutes. But up the stairs, yeah, it is kind of tough. But like I said, because you're going every few days, you're normally not carrying a ton of stuff or super heavy stuff unless you're getting like laundry detergent or ice or something like that. Or if you want to buy all your water and have the water jugs. I was lucky in all the places I lived, we just put filters on the sink. So you could just have filtered water, and then you have to worry about carrying those big jugs up all the time. So just kind of different things to think about. You will probably do a lot more stairs and a lot more walking in Europe, because a lot of people don't have cars there, especially if you're in a bigger city. You really don't need it. Public transportation in most places there is super convenient, and it's really affordable, and it's everywhere, to the airports, to all the main cities, towns, things like that. So it's really easy to get around, and you can normally get discounts for younger people and students, and then also if you are in the senior age range as well. So another kind of like inconvenience. Another thing in the home that probably a lot of Americans will notice that they don't have are dryers, like for clothing. A lot of apartments now do have washers, which is really nice. I think a lot of renters and just Europe in general has really started to add washers in. They're not super expensive, and through time, they do pay off. You will have to pay, of course, if you pay for water and electric to run it, but it's definitely so much more convenient to just have it in your home than have to lug everything down to a laundromat. But actually, most apartments do have a washer now, so you can pretty much expect that. Not every apartment, but quite a few do. So that is really common, but what they don't have are dryers. I think because electricity is still a lot more expensive in Europe, it is an electrical thing, so they don't do it. People air dry their clothes. And of course, again, depending on where you live, it's really not that bad. Most of the time, in most places in the summer, if you set something outside, it will dry relatively fast. Kind of the warmer air and the sun, it will dry normally within a couple of hours if it's just a regular piece of clothing. Of course, if it's, thicker blankets or sweaters, those do take longer. I will have to say this is a tougher inconvenience, especially in the winter, even in a place like Spain, where it's not that cold. But for some reason, stuff just takes forever to dry in the winter. So you do have to plan out laundry more ahead of time if you can, especially if you're washing bigger things like sweaters, blankets, comforters, anything like that. It will take multiple days to dry, maybe even longer, sadly. You can get around this if you did want to wash at your home and then just go pay for the dryer, because the dryer is cheaper than the washer. You can do that. I've also seen things online where you can get these kind of covers that go over the drying racks, and it's kind of like a vacuum looking thing, and it blows in air that helps dry clothes. That could be an option, but just be prepared for not having a dryer. So in the winter, it might take quite a bit longer for clothes to dry and things like that. So definitely a consideration, and something that I think a lot of Americans won't be used to, because most of us do have washers and dryers. There are some machines there that do have both, which is really nice, a washer and dryer built in. I never had one of those, but I did have a friend who did have one. So that would be really nice and something to look for when you're looking for an apartment here. That is just probably something you won't have. Another one of a household item you probably won't have, as most people know, are dishwashers. Dishwashers just aren't a thing in Europe, and in especially in Spain and everywhere. People just hand wash their dishes. That's kind of just how it is. Thankfully, if it's just you or a couple, it's really not too bad. You really don't go through too many dishes unless you're like a chef or something. And the kitchens are smaller, so you don't have a ton of dishes you could just kind of use and accumulate anyways. So that is something else. I know a lot of people really love the dishwasher. I didn't think it was too bad without. I mean, there are times where you kind of get tired and you're just like, I don't feel like doing the dishes. But normally it doesn't take too long to clean, so that is really easy. And then going along with the dishwasher, having a disposal in the kitchen. Disposals just aren't a thing. I think they were just not, of course, built into the plumbing when a lot of these older buildings were built. So everyone has a catcher and you just have to throw it out. So you will have to be more mindful, or your drains will get clogged, and their stuff is older, it does clog a little bit faster. So that is another thing to consider, just being mindful. I'm sure whoever you rent from, they will kind of go over that as well, because they don't want the drains to get clogged and something happen for the whole building, and it's just a really huge inconvenience. So that's another thing. And then lastly, I would say the biggest one for Americans when trying to adjust to just kind of basic, things we use in Europe would be the air conditioning. This, for me, I think is the most important thing that you can't get around, that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that is really hard to get around because the portable options aren't good. As I said previously, you can get grocery delivery, but there's not a ton. When it comes to the clothing, you can, go to a laundromat or have those other dryer options. But air conditioners, there aren't a lot of good portable units like there are portable heaters. So depending on where you live, or if you're just a naturally hot person, this will definitely be a huge thing to look for when you're looking for an apartment. Being in southern Spain and Barcelona, we have really hot summers, and I had so many of my friends just come to my place, and even just so many of us sleep on the floor just to have air conditioning, because it is so uncomfortable if you don't have AC. You can have all the fans in the world, which we all do. Most places don't have ceiling fans actually, but we have stand-up fans and desk fans, and whatever. But it can get so hot, and with those old buildings with no insulation, they feel really hot in the summer and feel really cold in the winter because of the bad insulation. Even if you have, let's say windows open and good airflow and fans, it is hot. So if you are someone who is hot or moving somewhere that gets really hot in the summertime, I would highly, highly recommend looking for a place that has an air conditioner in it of some sort. Most of the ones they have now are just wall ones. It's not central AC, of course, but the wall ones do work really good. I had them in a small apartment. They're great. I did try this portable AC thing because the first place I stayed didn't have an air. And it's okay, like when it's right next to you, you can feel the cold air blowing. But eventually, because you have to fill it up with a water container, which isn't that big, you have to keep refilling it, and it doesn't help so much. So there's no other way around. If you don't have an AC unit, you don't have an AC unit. So I think that is the most important thing to look for if you are living anywhere in Southern Europe, or if you're someone who gets really hot easily, to make sure you have an AC unit in the apartment, because that is really a huge thing and will really be a tough 3 or 4 months in the summer if you don't have one. Especially when you're coming home from walking and you're carrying stuff and you're hot, and to walk into a place that feels just as hot, it can be a pretty tough adjustment there. But these are kind of the biggest important, I think, what we call inconveniences that Americans, when they're moving to Spain, kind of get a reverse culture shock in, and why a lot of them really struggle with adjusting to a lot of these home things. A lot of people can adjust, to the food. Now with money and credit cards and international stuff, that's really no problem anymore. Language, of course, can be a barrier. But I think all these inconveniences can really, if you kind of get through all of these, it kind of makes everything else a little bit easier. So these are just things to consider if you want to move to Europe or are thinking about it. Just kind of be mindful of these things. And just because it's, something they don't have doesn't mean it's bad. I think a lot of Americans were conditioned to think, if someone else doesn't have it, then it's, inconvenient or not normal. And most of the world, is very different from America. So you if you're going to move anywhere in the world, kind of adjust to their way of living and how they do things. And these are just things that, are convenient. There's so many benefits, to Europe, the much better healthcare that's affordable, you don't have to worry about. All the student loans, paying for university is so much more affordable. It's a lot safer there. There's a lot less gun violence in Europe. So definitely a lot of different things to consider depending on what you're looking for. But I highly recommend it. I love living in Europe. I hope I can go back soon at some point because I don't like it here so much. But I hope this was helpful to anyone who is considering a move. And if you have any questions about a next move or considerations you're thinking about, just leave them in the comments below and I will answer them for you. See you next time.